Why doesn't Bitcoin work? And why have there been so many dirty hacks to create the pretense that it works? Craig, the innovation of Bitcoin, very simply, was what?
Bitcoin itself was a proof of concept to prove the idea that you could make real money that was digital in nature instead of just physical. So real money, the real in real money means something that you can't just make up. So the government can't buy fiat, you can't just pull gold out of your ear. It's a physical thing that was made in a star. You got to blow a star up to get it. So you can't fake that. The only way to get it is to mine it. And historically, there's been about a 2% increase in the amount of available gold in circulation throughout most of Western history, which, by the way, that's where the Fed came out with their inflation target. Coin was trying to prove the point that you could use the same principle that underlies the asymmetry, which makes gold a thing you can't fake, just cut down to the mathematics of that, and in a mathematical sense, in a computational system, solve cryptographic puzzles, and voila, you have real money in the real sense that nobody can control that. It's ungovernable money. So there was a good proof of concept. It did the proof of concept stage where you said it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work as money because it's not tradable enough. You've got 3% global, or I'm sorry, three transactions per second you can do globally. And pretty much that's the only feature is it's just transferable.
So from what you just described, and Ulf, maybe you want to step into this, why can't it be changed? Larry Fink is of the opinion that Bitcoin can be changed, and BlackRock are on a pathway to buy as much as they possibly can to drive that change. Why can't it be changed? Why are we left with what we'll come to in a minute, dirty hacks?
Yeah, one of the things about that it also tried to do was to create fully decentralized peer-to-peer transaction system. The part about fully decentralized means that nobody controls the net. So if you want to change it, fundamentally change it in a way that that really makes a big difference, you're going to have to convince everyone that's running Bitcoin nodes to independently install the new architecture and migrate over to the better system. And for that reason, they basically decided they had some experience in some years ago with hard forks that didn't really pan out. And so now they're extremely conservative. And it's really a technical thing. It's a social thing that it's extremely hard to fix the fundamental limitations of Bitcoin, because it would essentially mean switching everyone over at the same time to a totally new system. And that's the reason.
So there are severe technical impediments to being able to make the substantive changes to the Bitcoin core protocol that would be necessary in order to make the transition to higher scalability, native smart contracts, etc. From my perspective, I think a lot of the impetus has been that it's about number go up. It's about that this is the North Star of the number go up community. And what they want to see is anything that can support the narrative that Bitcoin is a functional currency, is a functional tool set, that a blockchain is a functional actual blockchain. It is an actual blockchain. It just isn't actually useful. It doesn't actually work. And so most of these things have been about trying to support a narrative of pushing the number up. And then, of course, you'll start to see negative articles coming out when they want the number to go back down again so they can fill their boots and scupper everybody else. The manipulation in Bitcoin has been going on, as was pointed out by when I mentioned about manipulation in Bitcoin, actually, a very interesting guy on LinkedIn popped in to tell me I was wrong. Not for the reason I thought somebody would tell me I was wrong, because they don't like the idea that Bitcoin is manipulated. I had written that Bitcoin has been manipulated away from the narrative of being a currency died around 2016, 2017 maybe. And what replaced it was the store of value thing. And really, it's just been one great big manipulation of information, one great big manipulation of price movement, all of these things. Information imbalances, classic market manipulation. Anyway, this guy wrote back to me. I'll read it out He said, it was manipulated long before 2016. I remember when it made the sudden jump from pennies to dollars, and again over a couple of years when it went from around $8 to $90. Around the same time, there was a flood of new folks in the forums, all pretty much repeating the same stories and talking points. Those accounts all seemed to go dead around the same time. Some kind of influencer campaign driven by sockets. It wasn't meant to convince forum regulars who tended to flag and block those accounts, but to seed through some SEO some of the same sentiments we see today. Hold, and the price will increase. Limit the supply and drive up demand. Classic penny stock pump and dump. Except the strategy worked too well, and Bitcoin went from being a fun little currency to play around with to a meme security with a cult following. Obviously better informed than I am. I had a longer sweep of the vision of it. I wasn't in those forums back then. I was aware of it, but in my rather autistic approach to things, I had concluded that it was never going to work, and it was a wonderful proof of concept, so I moved on. A whole industry clearly did not. And so we ended up with what we call the dirty hacks. Craig, dirty hack. Please explain what a hack is versus a dirty hack.
Okay, so a hack would be basically if you have a system that it can only do one thing, you can't change the definition of it, but you need it to do something else. You look for ways to abuse its function to get it to do what you want, even though you can't change what it is. Either that may be as simple as reinterpreting what the system does, or taking dead parts of the system and filling them in with something that you can use and then interpret in a certain way or whatever. A good hack would be something that's universally useful, that comes out and it's not just useful, it's easy to understand, and it becomes a new feature of the system. A dirty hack is something where you can get something done, but it's ugly, it's error prone. There may be security issues if you look at it too carefully. So you don't want people to look at it too carefully because it's dirty. You don't want to show them the nasty sort of thing that you figured out. In all cases, not all cases, sometimes stuff is just tedious. But in most cases, any kind of hack where you figured out how to make a system that only does this one thing, do extra things that you need, is fun, but it's often self-defeating. You typically resort to hacks when you're stuck in a fixed situation. And as I've just pointed out, it's impossible to change the core Bitcoin definition. So what we're left with is edge cases that we can use within the Bitcoin network to foster hacks, like the Lightning Network is a hack. The Bitcoin OS concept is a hack. Ordinals are a hack. Runes are a hack. But these aren't purpose-built features. These are just taking something that's there and then making them do something it was never intended to do, which is...
A lot of this is driven by the fact that, as Ulf, you pointed out on the longer form video, that the starting point was deciding what the answer was, and the answer was Bitcoin. So what we ended up with were these dirty hacks that were a means to making the answer Bitcoin. It was to, as you point out correctly, to beg the question. We've seen 4 really big names, big approaches into this I can think of. The first is the Lightning Network. So what is Lightning Network, and why does it not do as it says on the tin? It's claimed that it is a means to make Bitcoin something that we can use in everyday transactions between everyday people. Why is that not true? And what is it in reality? So let's other way around, forgive me. What is it? What is it?
So the Lightning Network is one of the original versions of what we call state channels. And one thing you can liken them to is your coffee shop card, where you top it up with money and you can swipe it in your coffee shop. You don't have to pull out your credit card. So here you create a channel, you lock some funds into it, and then you can transact quickly on the Lightning Network. Now, Bitcoin doesn't know anything about channels. So essentially you're creating 2x2 multi-sig UTXO on the chain, and you can update it once when you close it. And then you fake updates and exchange those outside the chain. Now, if you look at the Lightning Network, there are a lot of issues with how to use it. And a lot of them boil down to the fact that to create a channel, you have to do a Bitcoin transaction, and that's expensive and slow. And then you can't top it up. You can't update it, which means you can't rebalance liquidity. stuff like that. And that makes it difficult to make it work. And another thing is it becomes essentially the only way to do reasonably affordable transactions because you can't really do that on Bitcoin. And it suffers from the fact that if it would really take off, then the performance of Bitcoin wouldn't be sufficient. So then it would get even worse because fees would go through the roof and the chain would be saturated and it would be essentially be useless.
So I often make the argument that Lightning Network is a layer 2 for Bitcoin, by which we mean that it is something that operates off-chain and comes back to the chain, and the chain isn't actually aware of what it's doing. It's something that is taken up, out, back down again, a stamp. And however, the response is often, oh no, it's a layer 1. It's a blockchain in its own right. Now, neither of those are entirely correct. The latter is very incorrect. But fundamentally, guys like you two could actually set up Lightning networks and transact with one another because you have the technical know-how, ability, and almost muscle memory of how to do all of these things. So you could do these things relatively quickly. Somebody like me, who is not as technically competent as you guys, is going to end up using it as an intermediated service, which is definitely a layer 2. Craig, just quickly to cover that part off. You describe this well.
Even for us, it would be annoying to try to set up so to have, when you set up a channel with Lightning, it's a 2-party thing. To make that multi-party so you can transact within the Lightning network across to somebody else, you have to have pairs of transfer pairs, and they all have to be funded with liquidity. And remember, you can't top these up from the chain. You have to close it and recreate them, which means you got to recreate all the routes too. That's not so simple. So you wind up with aggregators that do this sort of networking routing for you, but now you're fully trusting them because they're the intermediary for you. Now it's a trustful system. Why not just do it inside of an exchange or a normal bank or whatever? You start wondering, why are we even doing this? And again, as Ulf points out, because of liquidity balancing issues, every liquidity rebalancing effort requires multiple transactions on chain. You wind up, remember, you only get 3 per second on the Bitcoin network. You pretty quickly saturate the parent network. So it's a neat idea. It just doesn't really work.
And I mean, there are others. There's Bitcoin ordinals, there's runes. We'll come to talk about Bitcoin OS in the next video. But fundamentally, what we're seeing is, as Ulf pointed out in the longer form discussion, that the answer is Bitcoin. Now we have to beg the question as to how we get there. And what I think, whether it's technological, social, or simply driven by a greed, the point is, it is a white paper of millennial significance. I keep saying that done correctly, blockchain is a multi-millennial opportunity for us to change the entire substrate of how we economically interact with one another, to restore economic emancipation to the individual. And that is the root of all of our freedoms. Once we are economically free, we are free in every other way. So with that, thank you very much for your time. Bye.